that's a big topic of conversation now. We're seeing more issues in attics, I think, than what we've seen in a long time in the past. And a lot of this is actually having to do, in my opinion, about what we're doing on the interior of the houses to seal our houses up tighter and tighter and tighter. I mentioned in another series that we were talking about is the stack effect and how air moves through a house. And if you looked at a house where you envision the house, again, looking like an hourglass, big at the bottom, skinny in the middle, and big at the top, this is the pressure planes. This is negative pressure. Everything is coming in this way. At some place in the structure it becomes neutral. At the top it becomes buoyant. As we know, hot air rises. We also know that air is a convector. And so as a convector, air is carrying with it moisture for the most part. Again, back to relative humidity types of issues. There is a misconception about where this mold is that we're seeing that comes from in a house. A lot of people that are experienced in the industry will tell you, well, the roof needs more venting, which I want to address in just one moment. But through this, what I want to go back to is the stack effect and actually how the stack effect is working. Sheetrock, again, is very permeable. Water will transfer through sheetrock very well. Water will also transfer through in and around your ceiling fixtures, your lights, things of like anywhere there's a hole, air will transfer. It's a very hard concept for people to understand about the convection issues that are going on in the house and the air transfer, and the air is actually carrying the moisture. So now on the ventilation issue within an attic or a roof, we'll walk around the house and we'll look at the top of the roof and we'll see these square vents up there, and there'll be a dozen of them, and there'll be typically at the very peak top of the roof. Each one of those square vents are designed to ventilate approximately about 300 square feet of surface. We're not always talking about square footage. We're talking about volume of air that moves through the house. So you may have a 2,100 square foot home, but your cubic amount of volume, length times height times width of air that's actually moving through the house is a massive amount of air that's actually being up and moving through the house. And so therefore, again, that air carrying moisture with it permeates through the sheetrock. The theory is those vents are supposed to allow the ventilation of the attic area, which in a lot of cases they do. Although we see the roof vents, we look underneath of the house and we see what we refer to as soffit vents. A soffit vent is in between what we call the roof rafters. As the rafters come out over the edge of the house, you look up there and you see there's like 3 or 4 holes in those things, and typically they are screened from behind to keep birds and that type of stuff out of the attic areas. If although you see that a bird has pecked their way through one of those vents, you physically will not be able to get to it very easily at all from the interior of the attic, in which you probably don't want to try that. You'll want to rescreen them from the exterior of the house to keep the birds out. So that is so as air does flow through the house and up through the house and trying to get its way to your roof vents, it's going to be pulling in good cool air from underneath the eaves and soffits. The other thing that we see on a house a lot of times is on the ends of the house. We see what we refer to as a gable end vent. Now that allows through cross ventilation, because even though you have the roof vents, the soffit vents, you may have areas in which in a house we are not able to get the venting. There may be a dead spot, in other words, okay? So the gable end allows for air to travel through this way. If there's an excessive amount of moisture that is coming from the house into the attic area, it doesn't really, in theory, matter how many vents you have. The reason is simply because in the wintertime, especially in the winter, we see more of this in the fall and the winter months, we have a cold roof surface, okay? And typically on the north side of the house, we see more prevalence of where this mold actually occurs. So you have a very cold roof surface. You have warm, moist air moving up through the house, all through the fixtures, and before it has a chance to get all the way to those vents, because now it's not moving under a lot of flow. In other words, it's not like a fan that's pushing it. It's just kind of permeating its way up. Okay, so the theory is great to have all the vents on the roof, the gable vents, the soffit vents, all that in theory is helping, but what happens is the air has no way sometimes for it to get up and out. And so when you have a larger volume of air as well, what happens now is that air, that warm, moist air is hitting that cold roof surface and it's creating condensation and bacteria. Now, How do we prevent that? And is that bad bacteria / mold? Is that really bad for you? Well, to understand mold, you have to understand there's 1,000 strains of mold. Only about 3 or 4 are actually bad for us. You eat cheese, probably eat mold, right? You let the cheese sit in the refrigerator too long, chop the mold off, okay? It's the same principle as what's happening in these attic areas. Not all mold is bad, although we don't want to have it, because that mold or bacteria will also create what we refer to as dry rot. It's kind of an oxymoron word. It has to be wet to call it dry, but it's a fungal rot. So the more bacteria that you have, it's fungi. And over time, that fungi will penetrate into the wood surfaces. It'll use that fungi, will use the wood as a food source, and so therefore it continues to grow. So therefore we don't want it rotting out our entire roof surface, okay? It's not gonna jump out unless you bother it. It's probably not gonna bother you for the most part. But we do want to remediate the mold by a professional mold remediation company to get that out of there. But again, we have to ask ourselves, where is it coming from, and how do we stop it from getting into the attic for the most part? And all that comes back again to the interior ventilation of a house, the occupancy usage of a house, how many people are in the house, the cooking, the cleaning, the showering, the laundry, the tightness of the interior envelope of the house. The only way that air has to go now, or can go now, is up and out. And with a large amount of volume of air in the house trying to push up and out, those vents, gable vents, soffit vents, roof vents, they can only handle a certain amount. The rest of it gets stuck on the bottom of the roof surface. So the aspect of having a whole house ventilation fan system, running that system, in my opinion, 12 hours a day, 3 to 4 hours in the morning, a couple hours in the afternoon, and 4 to 5 hours at night, is going to provide you more benefit than anything else that you can do with your attic. The other part is the insulation that's in the attic areas. Again, we want to make sure that the attic is insulated. The deeper and thicker the insulation is, the better it is. Why? Again, because of the R value, the resistance. We want to keep all that heat in the house. By keeping the heat in the house, we're also keeping the air in the house as well. And now we're relying on our whole house ventilation fan systems to actually exfiltrate that bad, moist, high relative humidity air out of the house. So when we talk about attic insulation, the processes, the correct processes now that we're using is what we call a blow-in, loose fill blow-in. And it comes in different types and styles and colors, but for the most part what we're seeing is a white cellulose product. It's kind of fire retardant in a little bit of regards, but actually we're blowing that in attics to a depth of anywhere between 14 to 18 inches. So the energy codes came out and said that, hey, we need to have like an R48 value, which is the highest value of R ratings within a house. R48 in the attics, R21 in our wall surfaces, R30 in our subfloors. So you can see now, plus our windows, what we're doing there. Plus now what we're doing is really giving this the envelope, right? What we call the conditioned space. A conditioned space is heated and insulated on all 6 sides, top, bottom, left, right, in and out. All 6 sides become a conditioned space. In the attic, as we blow this insulation in, the reason for the blow-in insulation versus the batted insulation is that the batted insulation doesn't give you the full 100% coverage. It looks like it does, but there are a lot of air pockets and air voids and thermal gaps and thermal breaks and things like that, and again, in which the air can pass from the house through that minimal insulation. You will not find, in my knowledge, I don't believe they make R48 in a batted insulation. So therefore, the principle is we blow insulation into the attic areas. The thicker the better. The more you have, the better it is. You cannot over-insulate that part of the house at all.